Hi, my name is Gene. Today, I'd like to share with you my journey into China and why the first piece of advice that Dr. Stephen Strange received before he became Dr. Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, is also the best piece of advice I can give you for winning in China. So if you saw Dr. Strange the movie, released by Marvel Studios in 2016, Mordo said something to Dr. Strange before he was first allowed into the sanctum to meet the Ancient One. Mordo said, "Might I give you some advice? Forget everything you think you know." Dr. Strange's reaction? Okay. You see, we are all skeptics when someone or something challenges our worldview or reality. Now, what Mordo was really saying is, the only way to discover a true path to success is to first erase all of your preconceived notions about how the world works. In other words, you can never know the things you don't know, which are your unknown unknowns, unless you are able to fundamentally adjust your own perceptions. Some people would say you need to adjust your mindset, but what I'm going to show you is how to develop a mindset for China business. Now, China has the world's longest continuous history, almost 5,000 years. But it's only been since 1980 that Deng Xiaoping opened China to the rest of the world and became Time Magazine's Man of the Year. And he actually had that honor twice, once in 1978 and again in 1985. This is when China began its journey to become the world's second largest economy and soon to be the first. No one today questions China's influence, which continues to increase both positive and negative ways for Western democracies. But for foreigners doing business in China, and it's a huge number, but specifically for Westerners and Americans, most of us are unaware of our cultural biases and, of course, our unknown unknowns. But more importantly, we are unaware of the implications and potential ramifications of our ignorance and often our egos too, which is why there is a deep-seated misperception that most Chinese people are corrupt and unethical. Yes, I said misperception, but not in absolute terms, in relative terms, because there are controllable factors most foreigners fail to incorporate in their approach or modus operandi for doing business in China that directly or indirectly leads to the bad behavior that's the source of most of our frustrations, anxiety, and mistrust towards Chinese people. Now, the year is 2004, and I'm the channel manager in Greater China for an American synthetics lubricants company. We're talking about very complex and proprietary formulations designed into things like printers and mobile devices, but also used in satellites, avionics, and military applications. Yes, these are the ones with mil specs that need special US government approval to sell to a communist country. For a bit of context, I was hired for this position because I speak English almost as well as I speak Chinese. And I have an engineering background from Georgia Tech, and I'd previously been country manager in Taiwan. So who could be more qualified to lead the business development efforts in China? Yes, that's what I thought too. Now, we started off working with distributors from Taiwan to handle sales in China. This made perfect sense because Taiwan is a democratic country that speaks Mandarin Chinese. We had offices in Shenzhen handling the South and Shanghai handling the West, but we needed to establish another office to handle Middle and Northern China. We hired Mao Xiaodong, not Mao Zedong, because he was a family connection with one of our Taiwanese distributors. Family in Chinese culture represents the closest guanxi connection. So remember that word, guanxi. Now, Mao was dirt poor. He was living in Shenzhen at the time, and he literally couldn't afford a train ticket to Shanghai. So we bought him a train ticket, and when he first arrived, he wasn't wearing any shoes. To make a long story short, we cleaned him up, rented him an apartment, then an office, and we trained and mentored him to be the general manager of our Nanjing office. We literally and figuratively took him from rags to riches. He soon had a company car and led a team of about 10 employees. Now, what could possibly go wrong? And how could it be possible that Mao would behave corruptly or unethically? Now, outwardly, Mao was very humble, gracious, and always thanking us for all we had given him, and rightfully so, as he continued to depend on our support. We constantly went on joint calls to get him up to speed with the technical side, and we even gave him inventory on consignment so he didn't have to bear those costs while getting his business started. American customers manufacturing in China were simply referred to him to take orders. Now, in those days, it was much easier for a local Chinese to register a business, and we thought having a family member we could trust was easily the best solution. In less than 2 years, Mao went from shoeless to driving a BMW. And of course, his success was our success. A win-win, right? Would you believe that Mao secretly registered all of our trademarks in China? And he's the brother-in-law of our Taiwanese distributor. Fortunately, we had a Guanxi connection in Beijing, and we were able to contest the registration in time. Would you believe then that Mao created fake labels and fake products that he then sold for greater profits to our key accounts? He began producing his own lubricants without the proper formulations, but he sold them with fake labels as an authorized distributor. Now imagine the nightmare warranty recalls for cars that failed because of bad lubrication. And we're not talking about engine oil. We're talking about connector lubricants and electronics, or high-end greases and oils to extend the life of power windows, door locks, seats, airbags, and steering mechanisms. Now, you're probably thinking this sounds like typical corrupt Chinese behavior, stealing IP and creating fakes. Isn't this currently the biggest challenge US tech companies face in China? Yes, but what if I told you all of Mao's bad behavior was actually our fault, and that it was easily preventable? Would you believe in hindsight that we actually forced him to behave this way? In other words, this type of bad behavior is totally preventable, and let me tell you how. When your Chinese partner claims local competitors are winning on price, don't discount the warnings as a negotiating tactic or posturing. When he says local quality is as good or better, don't try to convince him otherwise. And when he informs you that you need to understand Chinese culture and how things work in China, don't dismiss or ignore this good piece of advice. This is the time to ask questions and develop empathy and greater cultural awareness. You see, Chinese Guanxi relationships are based on a continuous exchange of goodwill and reciprocity. And when your Chinese counterpart doesn't receive the goodwill that he expects based on his gestures, which include his advice and suggestions, then what I call goodwill extraction is likely to occur. When Chinese people believe getting reciprocity from you is futile or impossible, then naturally they will extract goodwill from other parts of the value chain. You see, no one knows the Chinese value chain better than Chinese people. And this is where our ignorance, lack of cultural awareness, and egos eventually force our Chinese counterparts into what we see as bad behavior. To reciprocate bad advice you don't agree with, you simply need to acknowledge it, respect it, and attempt to better understand it. And with this attitude, you'll be amazed where the discussions lead, because remember, Chinese reason is circular, which means you need to begin with maybe in order to reach your desired outcome.